Hi, folks. What is up? Welcome to the very first live edition of the Vol Talk podcast. Welcome, welcome, welcome. With me is my brother Austin, of course, as usual. I am Blake, and joining us today as a guest once again is Dakota. Dakota is with us. Thank y'all for being with us.
Watch the video.
And boys, I mean, here we are. It's the final week of the regular season, and as we talked about in the review episode that we just dropped yesterday, it's win and you're in. There's no scenario where they can leave us out if we win this weekend. But tonight, what we're doing is we are going to be live reacting to this week's college football playoff rankings, which should be coming out, if my sources are correct, in about 10 to 20 minutes or whatever when they actually reveal the rankings. So, boys, Austin, we'll start with you, and then we'll go over to Dakota. Give me one word. How are you feeling tonight? How are you feeling about how we're sitting in the playoff rankings?
Nervous.
I'm gonna go hopeful.
Nervous and hopeful. I think you all just captured perfectly in two words what every single Vol fan is feeling: is nervous and hopeful. Because everyone's suffering from BVS, right? Battered Vol syndrome. But man, I'm wearing my hoodie tonight. Feels like '98,
Ooh.
baby. Everyone's hopeful. Okay, I got my Natty Daddy hat on. All right, everyone's hopeful that, hey man, we beat Vanderbilt and we're in. And we're gonna get into it here in a little bit, but there are some scenarios where Neyland might even host a playoff game, right, boys? So, if I'm not mistaken, kind of what our plan is for tonight is we are going to kind of just go over some. Eventually, we'll go over some kind of playoff scenarios. Again, we're going to live react to the drop of the college football playoff rankings tonight, which again should be going live imminently in a few minutes. But before we do that, we'll kind of get into our predictions for where we feel like Tennessee is going to fall. There was a lot of chaos this past week, right? So let's jump right into the predictions, y'all. Look, Alabama lost, Ole Miss lost. There was a couple teams that were kind of chomping at our heels that also lost, right? There's quite a bit of a shakeup in the rankings. So let's jump right in. Dakota, do you have a prediction of where Tennessee is going to land, and ultimately what the 12 teams in the playoffs going into this final week of the regular season, what that's going to look like tonight?
I'm immediately gonna backpedal on my hopeful by giving Indiana more credit than I think they deserve. But I think we're gonna come in at 9th. So I think we are gonna jump Alabama and Ole Miss, who deserve to fall out. But I have this sneaking suspicion that the committee's already overhyping the Big Ten, and I think that Indiana is gonna squeak in between us and Georgia at 8. And the reason is that they have two teams behind them that lost, so it pads their fall by them losing at 5. So I think they could squeak in between us, and we'll come in at 9th. We'll jump up Ole Miss and Alabama, and then we'll squeak in there.
Dakota, you and I are exactly on the same wavelength. That's exactly where I've got Indiana as well. And I even made a note on my predictions that it's possible, the way the bias has been on this committee, which is by the way headed by an athletic director in a Big Ten school. With the bias that has been in this college football playoff committee, I made a note that it's even possible that they swap Indiana and Georgia, that Indiana only falls to 7 and Georgia comes in at 8. Again, maybe that's the BVS talking. Maybe that's just me being a disgruntled curmudgeon about this committee. But yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I've got Tennessee at 9 and Indiana coming in right above us at 8, which I don't agree with, but I think that's my prediction. Austin, where are you falling in on all this?
Y'all must have not watched the Hoosiers on Saturday, bro. They looked terrible. They have like the 106th ranked strength of schedule outside of that Ohio State game. Listen, if the committee watches the games, which me and Dakota have theorized before, they don't watch the games, Very possible they just looked at the final the score and they were like, okay, we'll just throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. I think Indiana's going to drop to 10th. I think we are going to be above Indiana. It would make no sense to me if we weren't above Indiana at this point. I have Tennessee at 8. I have us above SMU. I actually have SMU above Indiana. We'll get into the full rankings hopefully soon. But yeah, man, I have us at 8 right now. So yeah, I like it.
Okay, all right. Tennessee at 8. Dakota and I have got us at 9. Again, that is our attempt at an objective prediction, right, of what this committee is going to do. And I hear you, Austin. I mean, the Hoosiers. Here's my point, right? The data is there, right? I don't know that Indiana deserves the ranking they have. Credit to them for their incredible season, but the strength of schedule, right, and then getting blown out by real competition, the first real competition they've had all season. Again, Michigan was a decently competitive game, but again, Michigan's barely got a winning record this year, and so I just the bias that we've seen from this committee, I don't know if they're going to take that into account. So we'll see. Playoff rank is going to be dropped soon, but yes, Austin, let's get into kind of what I'd like to do is a full kind of top 15 list from each of us of where we think everyone's going to fall. I'll kick us off to kind of get the conversation started. Obviously, I think we probably all agree there's not going to be any shakeup at 1 and 2, right? Oregon's coming in at 1, Ohio State's coming in at 2, and then from here, this is immediately it starts getting dicey, right? I think Texas is going to be at 3. Again, similar to Indiana, I don't know that Texas deserves that spot because of their strength of schedule, but that's where the committee's been putting them, and so I think they're going to fall in at 3. I think Notre Dame is going to jump up to 4. Notre Dame, who has a loss to Northern Illinois at home, for the record. Penn State at 5. Again, Penn State's a team where we've got question marks about the strength of schedule, right? Miami at 6. I've got Miami at 6. Again, big question marks there. Georgia at 7. Got Indiana at 8. Again, Dakota and I talked about. I don't agree with it, but I think that's where they're going to fall tonight. I've got Tennessee at 9. Now, here's the question mark. We talked pre-show about this team, this SMU team that could potentially jump. Some analysts are talking about SMU jumping Tennessee. I've got SMU at 10. Could this committee put SMU at 9 and us at 10? I would be furious if that happens. I think Alabama is only going to drop to 11. Okay?
Brother. Oh my lord.
Okay, listen. This is a hot take. This is a hot take.
It is a hot take.
This is what I think this committee is going to do. Okay. And again, this may be the BVS talking. Okay. I think Ole Miss will only drop to 12. And then from there out, rounding out the rest of the 15 would be Boise State, who would, again, everyone's got to understand it's not just the top 12 teams, right? It's we've got the conference winners and all that who could shake up who actually gets in the playoff. I've got Boise at 13, Clemson at 14, and then South Carolina at 15. So I had a few hot takes in there. Austin, it sounds like you disagree pretty strongly with some of those. So hit me. What you got?
My 1 through 3 is the same. The 1 through 3 won't change. I do like your shout for Notre Dame jumping Penn State. I think it's possible. I think it's very possible. I considered it. Just looking how dominant Notre Dame was versus a ranked Army team and how non-dominant, how close the Penn State-Minnesota game was, I could very much see Penn State getting moved back to 5. Georgia's going to be at 6. I think the committee's finally realizing Miami, or hopefully is going to realize Miami shouldn't even be in these rankings, but unfortunately they have to be just by the nature of their record. And then I got us at 8, as I mentioned. I think we deserve that spot, honestly. We probably deserve to be above Miami too. It just won't happen. Then I have SMU at 9. I think, honestly, at this point, they probably deserve to be a 9, at least top 10, in my opinion. And then I've got Indiana to 10. I think they're going to drop to 10. They can't drop out of the rankings because everybody else lost behind them, so they're going to still be in the rankings. Boise at 11. I think Boise will move up at least 1. Then I got Clemson at 12, man. I think Clemson, Honestly, in my opinion, well, Clemson's still going to have a chance to win an ACC championship, and we'll get into that later. But I think that winner of that Clemson-South Carolina game is going to be very notable. And then I got Ole Miss at 13. I think if the committee does what's right, Ole Miss will be ranked ahead of Alabama at the end of the day. Alabama got the break speed off of them, and they don't deserve to be at 13. In my opinion, they'd be all the way back at 20. Anyways, this is my prediction. And then I got Alabama at 14. I think the committee will do the right thing, man. I mean, they didn't just lose in Norman. They lost by 3 touchdowns. It wasn't close. It wasn't close throughout the entire game. They got dominated start to finish. So I think they will do the right thing.
Didn't score a touchdown.
Didn't score a touchdown, exactly. And then I got, to round it out, South Carolina at 15. I think South Carolina is a team that especially how they beat Clemson, this could be a team that grab the last at-large bid, in my opinion, South Carolina. And I think they should. If they go in and beat Clemson, I believe that game's on the road. If they go in and dominate that game, I think they should get that last at-large spot, in my opinion. So that's my top 15.
Man, I would hate to see old Beamer ball sneak into the playoff.
Better than Alabama.
That's true. But I do got to question you on Boise. So you think even though Boise State squeaked by Wyoming, which is one of the most sparsely populated states in the United States, I didn't even if
breaking out geography facts on us.
If Wyoming hadn't played Tennessee in like 2008 when I was like 10 years old and I went to that game, in the nosebleed section, I wouldn't know Wyoming played football. Okay, and Boise State barely squeaked by Wyoming, and you've got them moving up.
Well, I got them moving up just because of what happened in front of them. Listen, I'll say this later in the show because it's going to be relevant later in the show. I've never seen a team build their resume based on a loss more than Boise State. The only reason they're even in these rankings is because they lost by 3 to Oregon. That's the only reason they're in these rankings right now. If you go through and look at their schedule throughout the whole year, they've been squeaking by games the entire season in a very, very lowly conference. So I wouldn't have them at 11, but the committee will.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Dakota, what do you got? I had some hot takes. Austin's got, probably a more, what I believe should be a more accurate, but again, I'm a little bit more pessimistic. So what do you got?
I think I have more of what I would call the chalk option here, where I think minimal change happens. I think the committee just lets the chaos that happened move teams around. I think the top 4 stays the same. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas. I think Penn State stays at 4. We already talked about the Big Ten bias. I think they'll just keep them there. Again, riding off their best thing being a quality loss. Notre Dame then squeaks up to 5. I don't agree with it, but I think Miami comes in at 6 ahead of Georgia. I think they just value the one loss a bit more there. Georgia comes in at 7, and then, as we talked about earlier, Indiana falls in between us and Georgia at 8. We come in at 9, and then I think SMU does jump Boise at least. SMU comes in at 10 there. Boise State at 11 though, and the thing is, we're really just getting to a point where I've never seen a season where we have this many 3-loss teams. So it's like, who do you put where? But after Boise, I have Clemson jumping into the conversation where they're potentially a win against South Carolina and SMU losing the ACC championship away from squeaking in. And then, unfortunately, I have Alabama at 13. I don't think they fall that far. I just don't. I know they got blown out. We watched that game together, Austin, and they were terrible from start to finish. But
horrible.
The A on that jersey is going to carry them further than anything ever could. The only major difference I have here is I think the Big 12 squeaks in with a little love with Arizona State coming in at 14. I think they move up, and then I agree South Carolina at 15, right there on the brink.
For the record, I did have Arizona State at 16, so Arizona State will be somewhere between.
They're lurking.
Yeah, they are lurking.
And y'all fact check me here. If I'm not mistaken, other than a pending chaos at-large bid for Arizona State, does Arizona State not still have a chance at the conference title as well? Is that am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, they control their destiny as far as making the conference title. So, I mean, as we've stated many times, which I think certain fans still don't understand, the Big 12 champion is an automatic bid. So, one of these Big 12 teams that are not in the top 12 are guaranteed to make the playoffs. So, even though Arizona State, BYU, Iowa State, Colorado, those teams are out right now, whoever wins that conference will make the playoffs, likely at this point at the 12th seed.
Okay.
Right. Because they will, whoever the highest ranked is out of the best group of 5, and then the lowest Power 4 champion gets the 4 seed. So right now, the way it sits today, Boise State would get a bye.
Which is
Yeah,
blows my
isn't it,
mind.
right? Like, and we were so, I think we were, as fans, we had the wool pulled over our eyes. We were so excited about an expanded playoff that we didn't even stop to question. Wait a minute, automatic bids. Wait a minute, a Boise State could get a bye, could get a 4 or 5. What? And so it's an interesting situation that we've got. But it's what we've got. And at the end of the day, when it comes to being a Vol fan, again, it's just like any other team. You just got to keep winning. I mean, that's the bottom line, is you just got to keep winning. It doesn't matter what your seed ends up being. It doesn't matter, where you fall. You just got to win. So, but let's talk about Austin. Give me a time check. How close are we to the rankings drop?
Well, unfortunately, on ESPN, they're showing this stupid basketball game. Dakota, do you know if there's any alternative broadcast?
I can't find anything from
Okay.
looking on Twitter.
Now, will they drop the rankings even if they don't announce them on ESPN, or it's only going to be announced on ESPN?
It'll probably only be announced on ESPN. I'm looking on the app too, and I can't find anything.
From what I can see is that,
Yeah.
for me, from what I'm gathering is that they're just delaying. Like, it will just start. Because it says none of the, like, all these other ESPNs won't take it, and then I see people, just basketball fans, calling out football fans, saying, you losers have to wait.
Nice.
Color me shocked that fans are saying inflammatory things online, right? But hey, you know what? That is good news for our 35 fans of this show, because that just means an extra long episode, baby, an extra long live episode. So you get to see our beautiful mugs and hear our beautiful voices for that much longer. So let's transition then to let's talk about Tennessee scenarios specifically. Okay, what I'd really like to know, and I think what a lot of fans would like to know, is let's talk about these scenarios where Neyland hosts a playoff game, and I think I probably speak for all three of us that if there's a playoff game in Neyland, especially the first year of the 12-team playoff, you bet your sweet bippy that these boys are going to find a way to be there, right? I might have to crawl over the fence, I might do something, but we're going to try to make it to a playoff game if it happens in Neyland. So let's talk about what is the scenario, right? How do we get a home game in Neyland? What seed do we have to come in at?
Yeah, we got to come in at the A seed. That's the seed that's the cutoff for home playoff game. And we're honestly we're looking into that seed right now. We don't have it yet. Well, it depends on the show. We'll see what happens in the show. But I think, depending on what happens in the show, just one other team has to drop below us. So that could be Notre Dame losing. That could be Penn State losing. That could be a conference championship game going really poorly for a team. Like if Texas just gets blown out and then they finally realize, hey, Texas's best win is Vanderbilt, and Tennessee, hey, if they blow out Vanderbilt, then why is Tennessee not ahead of them? So it'll see. There's a lot of different scenarios, but I'm looking at A, the conference championships, and B, Notre Dame at USC. I think that's a very losable game for Notre Dame, and in that scenario, we would jump Notre Dame, in my opinion.
That's so. There's that, and then there's I'm sitting here thinking about again, you mentioned the conference championship games, but also what about Texas A&M? Texas still has A&M on their schedule, and we know Texas A&M is a very good team. So what does that do? Now, we know that if Texas A&M wins that game, then they're playing Georgia in the SEC championship.
Correct.
Right? And so there, two questions comes from that. One is, what does that do for our seeding? To your point, Austin, it drops Texas, but how far do we leapfrog Texas if they lose to A&M? I think we, again, maybe the bias, but I think we probably deserve to, based on strength of schedule and the quality wins. But then the next question becomes, what does that do if A&M gets in the SEC championship game? And then also, what happens if they win it?
Oh, don't say that. What do you think? What do you think, Dakota?
Yeah, that'd be doomsday. I think I think Texas really is the key there. I think we all three agree that Georgia is probably going to win that rematch. Um, and if Georgia does beat them pretty definitively again, I think, I mean, already comparing our loss to Texas's against Georgia, we were on the road and we played that game far more competitively than they did. So in my opinion,
Correct.
and common opponent, if we handle Vanderbilt, I think there's no reason for Texas to be ahead of us if they have 2 losses. So in all honesty, we're kind of continuing this train this past week into next week and then into championship Saturday that we're rooting for our rivals, unfortunately. Yep. It also means the further up Georgia gets, the later on we have to worry about playing them, which is also good because if we stay close to them in the rankings, if they lose a close game against Texas, they could stay around there. And even in Neyland, I don't think we want Georgia again right off the bat. That's just not the matchup we want. So I think that's big. Unfortunately, outside of that, I think your point, Notre Dame USC is huge. But the rest of the games are, I mean, to be fair, this entire Ohio State roster has never beaten Michigan before. So Michigan
Very
could
true.
play spoiler. And not even, from Ohio State's, I think, well, actually, if they lose, Indiana goes to the Big Ten championship game. Because they only have 1 conference loss. Ohio State would have 2, so that is still an at-large conference bid. So that shakes things up drastically. And in a weird scenario, that may be our best case scenario, is Michigan beating Ohio State. Ohio State, they're at 2, but you can't keep them very high after that. And then if Indiana goes, they're going to get wrecked by Oregon. Let's be honest. So it kind of pushes the opportunity for both of them to get pushed behind us, in my opinion. So I think those are the most intriguing. But then to Blake's point, Texas A&M could throw a massive.
Don't say that. That's. Let me just tell Vols fans, we have to be Georgia fans. We have to be Georgia fans from here on out. We want Georgia in that number 2 slot for the SEC champion for a lot of the reasons Dakota already pointed out. One, do we really want to play Georgia in the first round under any circumstances? Like, that's probably the one team that we're like, yeah, I'd rather not play Georgia in the first round, frankly. Like any other team, I'm like, yeah, we have a chance at home or on the road, frankly. So we got to root for Georgia. And just to touch on the nightmare scenario where A&M takes up a playoff spot, guaranteed. Remember, guaranteed automatic bid at 3 losses. In that scenario, Texas is getting in, Georgia's getting in, and we're getting in. And in that scenario, I don't see how we could get a home playoff game because they would rank Georgia ahead of us if they lost to A&M in the conference championship. And who knows what they'll do with Texas. I agree with you all. I think you all both said that if Texas loses that A&M game, there's like no reason they should be ranked ahead of us in that scenario, just because of their strength of schedule, and then we'll see what happens in the Vanderbilt game. All this dependent on if we can beat Vandy on Saturday. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's, obviously at the end of the day, that is the the main thing as Vols fans that we need to be concerned about is beat the Commodores, which again, as we've mentioned in years past, that wouldn't have been necessarily a question unless our coach was Butch Jones. But they're a good team. They're a good team. They're a solid team. We're giving them a lot of locker room material too, because we got some fans putting up. I don't know if y'all saw the checker Vanderbilt Stadium stickers getting put up across campus at Vanderbilt. So we're giving them plenty of material, man. They're going to be fired up for that game. They're going to want to play spoiler to us. And again, I'm going to be in a deep, dark depression. This podcast might end outright if we lose to Vanderbilt this week.
It's over.
It's over. It's a good run. Got up to 35 subs. What a great run. But yeah, we got to win, and that's the main thing that we're concerned about is win and you're in. So And we'll, we've got an episode. We're still going to do the Vanderbilt preview episode. That is going to drop tomorrow, right? Austin's going to drop
Tomorrow morning.
on Wednesday morning. So definitely check that out tomorrow morning. That it's not a live session. That'll be a pre-recorded session that'll drop tomorrow morning. So be sure to check that out to see mine and Austin's thoughts on the upcoming Vanderbilt game, which is crucial. It is we said on the episode you all will see tomorrow morning. It's probably the most crucial of. I mean, it is the most crucial of Heupel's career because we have a chance to play for a championship if we win. And Dylan Sampson, I'm sure you all saw in the presser, I believe it was today, said, hey, we know this is a playoff. This is basically a playoff game this weekend. So I hope, and I think that these players understand the absolute gravity of this game, right? So let's talk about as we're still filibustering we're just building that anticipation, right? We're just building the anticipation, waiting for those rankings to drop. Austin, go ahead and interrupt us as soon, or Dakota, if you find a different alternate stream, just interrupt us if those rankings drop.
Let's talk about what DSAMP said. What do y'all think about Heupel basically, because they all know, they all have social media, they can see that this is a win, you're in. You can't just tell them it's just another game. What do y'all think about the coaching staff basically telling them, hey, this is the playoffs, and DSAMP comes out in the press conference and be like, yeah, we all know this is the playoffs on the line. Do you think they handled that right, or would y'all have handled it differently? Personally, I think they handled it right because, dude, I mean, if anyone scrolls Twitter for 5 minutes, they're going to see that all over.
Well, first and foremost, as a Vol fan, I just have to take a second to say what an absolute travesty and joke it is that Dylan Sampson was not a finalist for the best running back in the country. Okay, we get it. That Boise State running back, he's great. Okay, I get it. Dylan Sampson's literally the first in the SEC across the board, and is the first in FBS in a couple categories, first in the Power 4 in several categories. Dylan Sampson not being a finalist for that award is an absolute joke, and the people who decide that award or vote on that award should be just truly ashamed of themselves. Got to start by saying that when we're talking about Dylan Sampson. But no, I agree with you. I think, at the end of the day, and Dylan Sampson, we know, is a leader on this football team too, right? And he comes out and he says, hey, we know this is a playoff game. That tells me that he's speaking for the whole team, right? He, as a leader on that team, we know that he's speaking for the team. And I think ultimately the players do need to, let's not pretend, like they don't know. Let's not pretend like, oh, it's just any other game. We just got to go out and play our game. No, it's time, like, put it all out on the line. Okay, it's all or nothing at this point, right? I mean, there's no, hey, we can drop one to Georgia and maybe still sneak in, right? It's, you got to win, otherwise you're out. And so it is a de facto playoff game, so why pretend like it isn't?
I think you all touched on it on the UTEP review about DSAMP is just a leader on the team. I think this coming from him means everything, because I think a lot of the times teams will talk in the press, and it may not be the way they're actually feeling, but they're saying the things that everybody wants to hear. But I feel like it coming from him and just knowing him and this team, I believe that they are actually focused on Vanderbilt and not pulling a Mike Elko, where you say you're focused on Auburn, say Texas, and then you go lose to Auburn. So we don't want that to happen. But yeah, I think, to your all's point on the UTEP review, I think DSAMP is the leader of this team. And then back to your point on the Doak Walker Award, I would love to know a statistic on how many times an SEC running back has had 20-plus rushing touchdowns in a season, leading the SEC in rushing, and didn't be a finalist for that award. I would just love to see that stat. Like, it'd be tough.
Probably zero.
I would bet, yeah. Because, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, no disrespect. I mean, Genty was a finalist no matter what. No disrespect to Caleb Johnson and Mary Hampton from North Carolina and Iowa, but come on, man. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I think one of them had like 12 touchdowns rushing to DSAM's 22, and they only had like a couple hundred, like a little bit more rushing yards. And it's like, they have more carries, but he has like the same amount of yards per carry, so he's doing just as much on less. So that is ridiculous in my opinion. So
Yeah, I mean, it's hard seeing something like that. It's hard not seeing those kind of things and not thinking, okay, there's a clear bias here. There's a clear bias towards a certain school, and because let's be honest, okay, let's all be honest. If he wore crimson, he would be in those rankings. He would be as a finalist without question. A lot of people say that if he were a different uniform, he'd be in the Heisman and finalist conversation, maybe going to New York. Now, to me, that's irrelevant because it's like the Heisman is a two-man race at this point. But still, I mean, you can see a clear bias towards Tennessee from the media in awards like that. So it's disappointing, man, but hopefully Dylan Sampson can use it as motivation going forward because we're going to need him big time.
Absolutely, he's going to be absolutely critical for Vanderbilt. And I'll be honest with y'all, I think Dylan Sampson is probably the kind of guy who he's never going to say it out loud that he is taking it personal that he was left off this list, because I think that's the kind of guy he is. But at the same time, speaking as a person who I think I would probably be I hope I would be a little bit like this is, you come out and you say, hey, I didn't take it personally, but on the inside, and you're going to come out and you're going to show them. I would love to see that from D-Samp. I would love to see him just come out and choose violence on Saturday and just absolutely run all over these Commodores. I would love to see that. I hope the coaches give him an opportunity to do that. But regardless of the Doak Walker Award, we need, like y'all said, we need him. I mean, we're going to need him for this game against Vanderbilt and going into the playoffs. So shout out to Dylan Sampson. We love Dylan Sampson. He's a Tennessee great, one of the greatest of all times. I mean, he is, by the record books, the greatest of all time in a couple different categories. So shout out to him. We appreciate him regardless of what these bum award voters think. So with that being said, y'all, we are getting closer and closer, inching closer and closer to these playoff rankings dropping. Let's talk real quick about, we already talked kind of a little bit about nightmare scenarios, right? Let's put on our pessimistic hats a little bit. Dakota and I were kind of a little pessimistic on, where we might fall in relation to Indiana. But let's put on those BVS hats real quick. And what is, outside of us losing to Vanderbilt, right? Obviously, we all know what happens if we lose to Vanderbilt. Outside of that, what are our worst case scenarios for the playoff rankings this week and just, at the end of the season?
Yeah, I think you touched on one earlier. I think Texas A&M beating Texas throws a wrench in that, because to Austin's point, if that happens, all five of us, or all four, I guess, at that point, will be getting in, but we'll be the back end of that, most likely, depending on how the Texas A&M goes. But either way, that pushes us down. We still have the Big 12 team to jump us. That's happening regardless. So no matter what you see our ranking at tonight, bump it down one at least, because that's technically where we'll slot in at. And then honestly, tragically, I talked to Austin about it at what the committee's going to do about conference champ losers is the biggest question mark in all of this. And I think a doomsday scenario would be SMU beating Miami in a close game, because then SMU jumps us, and Miami probably stays ahead of us with 2 losses coming off of a conference championship appearance. So those are the type of things that I think could, shake things up. And Clemson blowing out South Carolina, that could do it too, because they're a 2-loss team. They have a much worse loss to Georgia at the beginning of the year. And to be fair, their schedule's not great, but you never know what the committee may do if Clemson goes out there and beats South Carolina by 28. But those are kind of the things that I could see that could happen, with SMU beating Miami and then A&M kind of being the big spoilers.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Dakota just said. Speaking on the Clemson thing, I'm not saying I would think Clemson should be deserving of it, but at the end of the day, if we have the same record and Clemson's playing better right now, like if we squeak one out against Vanderbilt and they blow the brakes off a good Carolina team, I could definitely see that happening. I could definitely see a scenario where that's happening, because I think you all would agree, if you have the same record, you have to have a little bias towards a team that's playing better right now. I mean, that's that's why Clemson's still in this thing, in my opinion, because if they lost 34-0 against Georgia this week, they would have no chance of making the playoff. But it happened in week 1, and I think we would all agree that if they played again, that wouldn't happen again. Clemson's a much better football team right now. So that could be a doomsday scenario. Now, I will say that the Miami scenario, I just don't see happening. I think we'll see tonight. We're about to see. The rankings are finally coming on. We'll see what they do with Miami. If Georgia doesn't jump Miami, then I agree with Dakota. I could see a scenario where a 2-loss Miami team is still ahead of us, even though they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of different scenarios that we don't want to see, some that we do want to see. We're about to get to the actual nitty gritty of it here in a second. Austin, you can go ahead and interrupt us once those numbers start coming down. But I y'all make a great point that I was gonna say is that I think we've already seen from this committee how they are favoring how teams are playing now versus earlier in the season. I think that possibly had something to do with how they ranked Alabama. Previous to this Oklahoma loss, right? They saw an Alabama team that had dropped 2 games, but then was suddenly, looked like they were playing much better. The LSU win is not what we thought it was, right? It's not as good as we thought it was, but the committee was, thinking it was a good win at the time, and they were looking at how Alabama was playing now compared to previous in the season and favoring that. And so I think y'all are absolutely right. Austin, I think you're right, about Clemson. And so there's a lot of scenarios where we, at the end of the day, Austin, you've made this point several times, it matters how you win as well, right? And so we really need to leave no doubt. That I've said that a few times on this podcast, leave no doubt. So we need to go out and we need to beat the brakes off Vanderbilt, so that there's just, we need to do everything in our power and leave no doubt on our end, because if we leave a little bit of room for doubt, then who knows?
Well,
they're starting to roll out.
They're starting to roll out.
They're starting to roll out. You must be a little ahead.
They're slowly rolling, yeah. One thing I just want to quickly say to which I had looked at, nobody's talking about this, but Kalen DeBoer this year is 1-3 in road games, which is great news for us.
Y'all, Colorado at 29, that's very interesting, dude. The AP has them at what, 20? That's a big discrepancy, I think, with the AP.
Yeah, I don't want to see this.
Yeah, the AP was
23.
Kind of funky.
Okay, so it's not massive. It's not massive. Okay.
Kansas State is actually ranked, which they should be. Did they finally kick Missouri out? Did we finally do that?
Ooh, I think they did. Or
did they? No way Missouri jumped to 21, right?
No.
Okay, we're going to continue inflating Alabama's wins.
Oh, awesome. Well, that'll help.
Sorry, if I am slightly ahead, I don't want to spoil it.
No, you're good. No, you're good. We'll react to what you react to, Dakota.
Yeah, go ahead and drop them, Dakota. What are we looking at? 25.
We got A&M at 20.
They dropped big. And
this is where we're really going to find out where teams fell.
Yep.
They falls 5 spots, losing at Auburn.
Very close game at Auburn
BYU
as well.
At 19, so this is matching the AP poll right now. 20 and 19 is the same as the AP poll.
It means Bama will probably be 13.
They only dropped 5 spots each. I think, man,
Bama at 12.
They did drop Colorado 9 for losing to Kansas, though, and that's basically not the same, but kind of what
pretty much it's pretty much the same. Okay,
Iowa State at 18.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think they kind of. The Big 12 is interesting.
Yeah, Iowa State's still in the hunt for a conference championship, are they not?
They are, yeah. I don't know how I saw the scenarios, it's crazy. I think Arizona State controls their destiny. The others, they need a win and a loss everywhere here to get in. Arizona State at 16?
Okay.
Wow.
That's where I had them.
Dude, that means Ole Miss and them didn't drop below the top 15. They are creeping. All of them are creeping.
They are.
This is wild.
They are creeping.
Who was 17? Who was 17?
Tulane.
Okay.
South Carolina.
So they didn't jump Bama.
I'm telling
of course.
You right now, Alabama,
it's going to be
the true doomsday scenario is we lose to Vanderbilt and Alabama still gets in. Just saying. That is not completely out of the picture.
That's ridiculous.
Oh,
and that is the full riot as a Tennessee fan. We had the anniversary of the Greg Schiano incident. That would be
yeah, that's right. Today was that anniversary. Good.
That
good
would be
timing.
the second version. Yeah.
Right.
If they do the right thing, they'll put.
At
Oh
14.
wow!
Ole Miss at 14,
This
wow.
committee is so dirty.
If Alabama is
This
ahead of
committee
Clemson, I'm
is
going to lose it.
dirty. Bama should be 13 minimum.
If they are not
Minimum.
dude, they are literally again.
I'm gonna
people gotta
blow up.
look, they are all they need is Indiana. They can.
That's it. Oh yes. Oh yes. I cannot believe they put Ole Miss below Alabama, dude. They are crooked.
That is wild.
They're
'Cause
so
Florida's-
crooked.
To y'all's point, I mean, to y'all's
Alabama's
point
13.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. They did the right thing. They did the right thing. Good.
Here's where things get interesting.
And I think if South Carolina beats Clemson at Clemson, they're jumping Alabama. Let me know. They're jumping Alabama. I'm just letting y'all know right now.
And okay, we've talked about this in the past. Now they're doing a little lull here, but
Of
it
course.
sucks because in the past, like I don't want to sound like hypocritical when we talk about us versus Alabama, but South Carolina lost by 2 to Alabama in a game they should have won. I think to your
At
point,
Alabama.
Where you're playing right now, South Carolina is a much better football team. Not even close,
Much better.
in my opinion. All right, here we go at 12.
And Alabama's going to lose the Iron Bowl anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's going to be Clemson,
Hope so.
right?
God, I hope so.
Clemson at 12? Or maybe they jumped
God.
Boise State.
It is
Boise State.
It is
Clemson.
Clemson.
Clemson at 12?
Wow.
So beating
So
Wyoming by
that's-
3.
I mean, literally,
Good
them
win.
winning that game is huge, though. Them beating
Huge.
South Carolina, they may get in because somebody's probably slipping up and they can squeak
Yes. Yep.
So what is that going to put Boise State next at
in. Them or SMU. I think
11.
SMU should jump them based on, to your point,
Yeah,
the
they
Wyoming
will.
game was pretty rough.
They will.
It's got to be Boise at 11 and SMU at 10.
I'm honestly shocked Clemson didn't jump Boise. I mean, I would have had Clemson jump Boise.
Or Indiana could have plummeted, but
Oh, no way. No, Boise over Indiana, no way.
that would be bold.
It would be bold, dude. That would be wrong. My only problem right now is really Alabama over Ole Miss, to be honest.
Yeah,
with
that's absolutely. I mean, based on those losses, I mean,
yeah.
Boise at
100%.
11.
Boise at 11.
11.
Okay. Now this is where it gets interesting, boys. This is where it gets interesting. Indiana or SMU?
or are they going to drop us to 10?
Boy, stop. Stop. No
It
way.
could happen. It could happen.
Oh god, dude, it could.
No
the
way.
thing is, these people have been
Don't.
predicting an SMU jump, and if it happens, man,
Don't.
I'm gonna throw up.
I'm gonna throw it up as well.
I had to cut it.
It's in a lot. It's just they're talking about the 11 through 15.
So right now, is Alabama the first team out, or the second
Technically,
team
it'd be Clemson.
Yeah,
Technically, it'd be
Clemson's.
because of the automatic.
out? Because
bid.
of the automatic
Clemson.
bids.
Yep. So they would be 13 and 14. All right, here we go. 10 is Indiana.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow.
10 is
Wow.
Indiana.
So SMU
I
could
called
still
that.
jump us.
Yeah.
I called that. That was my exact ranking.
You're right. You're right.
But see, I just did not have any faith in the committee doing the right thing.
Oh, 100%.
SMU at 9.
Wow. Wow.
Just look at my rankings, boys. That's the rankings right there. I had the script.
I loved it, but you had faith in the committee, and we did not.
Yeah, exactly. I
The
did not
only
have any faith in
thing
committee.
the only thing I got wrong right now is Ole Miss. That's the only thing. I thought Ole Miss should be ahead of Alabama.
Which you're right. They should be.
Yeah, they should be.
But now we'll
so
see
we're-
Miami though. If Miami, I mean,
Yeah.
That's true.
mainly
That's
Georgia.
true.
We've got it. Here we go. At 8.
Tennessee.
Who's at 8?
It's got to be Tennessee.
It's gotta be. It's gotta be.
Tennessee at
Yep.
8. We move up 3 spots. I
Okay.
love it though. So
I
as
love
of right
it.
now, technically we're the 9 seed. So people keep that in mind. Bump that
Yep.
down 1.
Yep.
We are the 9 seed, so we would be playing at. Again, we just talked about this a second ago. There's conference championship games that still have to happen, so it's not going to be exactly this. But as of right now, technically we would be at whoever is ranked directly above us right now.
And we would only need one slip up in front of us to have a home playoff game.
Yep. And us being 8 now is massive because then Ohio State losing. Oh, Georgia's 7. Miami.
Wow.
So
Wow.
they kept Miami at least. But
Yeah.
Penn State,
They-
Notre Dame stuff could still happen.
Dakota, do you think they watched the Miami game?
I don't think they turned it on. They looked
Yeah,
at the
they
box score,
they
because
they
I watched that
literally.
shit show.
Yeah, exactly, dude.
terrible.
Exactly. They didn't even see the score at halftime. They just
No,
saw the
looked at
final.
box score.
They just saw the final.
final was like Miami handled business, never a
They-
doubt.
Never
It
a
wasn't
doubt.
20-14 about to be the fourth quarter. Ever.
Against Wake.
Yeah.
Wake. Are you kidding me?
Which Miami's been. I mean, Miami's not been playing well all year. They've been squeaking by all freaking year.
We still got to
Miami's
see if.
6.
Okay, we still got to see if Blake's right about Notre Dame.
Right. Yeah, here comes. So they're talking about Miami now. They're talking about their huge win over Wake Forest.
Dude, it's massive, dude.
Statement win. Statement win.
I think you all would agree with this, but I would take Clemson on a neutral field over Miami right now. Pretty comfortable.
I mean, the only team I wouldn't in the playoffs right now is probably Indiana and Boise State.
Fair.
Frankly.
SMU, we'll find out soon.
I think SMU's going to win that game, dude. I really do.
They're interesting. All right, so as of right now, technically we'd be at Georgia, which is brutal. Notre Dame at 5. So I think things stay in chalk. Top
yeah,
so
it's going to be chalk.
The only thing, my prediction part was right, was the top 6 just kind of being the chalk thing that they would do. But
yeah. I'm honestly, dude, if we're being objective, I think Notre Dame probably should have jumped Penn State this week. Honestly. And I get the NIU loss. You have to look at that. But, dude, it's tough. It's tough because Army was ranked in their rankings, and they blew them out. But that doesn't matter.
And again, we're talking about how teams are playing now, right? And Notre Dame has been playing much better, and Penn State beat Minnesota by 1 point. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
How do you even compare that to an Army victory for Notre Dame? I mean, it's just.
I totally agree.
And yeah, the rest is what we thought. So.
Okay.
Very, very interesting. Ooh. So this is good news.
It is.
I just want to. Austin's prediction is massive. Indiana being behind us already, 2 spots at that. They put SMU ahead of them. Is massive because now our path to a home playoff game is Georgia losing the SEC championship game, Texas getting beat by Georgia again in the SEC championship game.
Yep. Or Notre Dame losing
to Michigan. Notre Dame losing to USC. Any of those. The chance of us getting a home playoff game is, I would say, is probably about 65% right now.
Likely. I will say this, too, and I think you all will agree with me on this. How we win against Vanderbilt is going to matter, especially with the Texas comparison. If Texas goes and loses the SEC championship, let's say they take care of business against A&M, they play the SEC championship and they get blown out again, they are going to look at how both teams played Vanderbilt. They are going to look at that kind of thing. And if we blow out Vanderbilt by 3 touchdowns, it's very likely we jump a Texas, who will still make the playoffs, but we will jump them in the rankings to get a home playoff game, in my opinion.
Literally the only thing they would have on us, which would be absolutely insane for them to use, is the Arkansas common opponent. But
which was still a close game with Texas.
It was close, and the environments were completely different too. That was like a noon kickoff. But other common opponents, we played Georgia much closer than their 1 game so far with them. And then if we handle Vanderbilt by more than 3, because Texas was at Vanderbilt, I think it was like a noon game then too. So you can easily compare those two. It's the exact same scenario. But to be honest, Vanderbilt has more to play against us anyway because they hate us. So.
Yeah, exactly.
What happens if Texas beats Georgia in the SEC championship game? You know what?
I think Georgia will be ahead of us, man. I do.
Which would be unfortunate. I mean, that's going to be because then that's going to solidify Texas's spot. I mean, shoot, Texas might even jump Ohio State if they beat Georgia, right, in the SEC championship. And so that's I mean, what happens? You know, I mean, Georgia's not going to drop, are they? So Georgia stays the same with a loss.
I will say this, okay? As an Alabama hater, I'm feeling pretty nice. Because, the Ole Miss thing I disagree with. But I think the winner of Clemson and which of course if Clemson wins, it's a guarantee. But if South Carolina wins that Clemson game, I think either way, Bama's getting jumped.
Here's a legitimate question for you guys. With talking Alabama scenarios, I completely agree with it. There is 0 reason that team should sniff the playoff.
Yep.
But what happens if Notre Dame loses a close game to USC? How far does Notre Dame fall? And does that squeak another team in?
What do you think, Blake?
I don't think Notre Dame's dropping out of the playoffs with a loss to USC.
Agreed.
I really don't. I don't think they are. Especially, you know, I mean, you look at Indiana. Indiana was 5. Indiana dropped 5 spots, right? To a pretty bad loss to Ohio State, and their strength of schedule is pretty terrible. I don't see Notre Dame dropping more than 5. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no scenario. I don't see a scenario for that. What I'm more worried about is what happens if SMU loses to Miami, and again, and some more shakeup happens. What if Clemson loses to South Carolina? I know, Austin, you think South Carolina jumps Alabama, but what if SMU loses badly? What if South Carolina wins a close game against Clemson? I'm worried about Alabama's finding a way in. That would
Let me
be
just say this.
asinine.
Let me just say, I would love to play Alabama in the playoffs. We would beat the brakes off Alabama. Give me a damn break. I ain't worried about Alabama. But anyway, I agree with you, man. I think Notre Dame's not dropping out of these playoffs. I think it's just the nature of the 12-team playoff, dude. It's 12 teams, people. Like, we got to put 12 in. At some point, you got to start putting 2 lost teams in, whether they lost to NIU or not. This all happened because of the shakeup last week, right? All this happened because there was so much shakeup last week, and it opened the door for a team like Notre Dame. Okay, you have more cushion now. You have much more cushion at this present time.
I think honestly an ideal scenario right now. Obviously, the higher up we can get, the better. But ideal scenario is Georgia beating Texas, Texas dropping below us, nothing else really changing, and then SMU losing to Miami, and there's a solid chance we get Indiana and Neyland round one.
Oh,
And I think
that'd
every
be
Tennessee fan would say that's
barbecue
almost
chicken.
best case scenario.
That dude,
'Cause we can
brother.
also shut those fans up. They've been talking. I've seen fans talking on Twitter to Tennessee fans, and that would be a beautiful game.
That is straight up barbecue chicken for the Vols, dude. I mean, we'll
Winner,
probably
winner, chicken dinner, baby.
I mean, what do y'all think? I mean, we're looking at a at least 10-point spread in our favor, in my opinion, against Indiana
Neyland,
on a
yeah.
neutral field. I'm
Oh,
or
in Neyland, 10-point spread,
Lock.
10-point spread easily. Yeah,
easily, dude.
even maybe even on a neutral field, probably an 8 or 9-point spread. But let's discuss this Texas Georgia situation, right?
Okay.
Okay, because again, we're talking about, hey, Notre Dame has some padding. We don't expect Notre Dame to fall out of the rankings if they lose to USC. So in a scenario, again, Texas is at 3 right now. They're in such a good position, right, at 3, which I think we all agree they don't really deserve a ton, right? They're at 3. Okay, if they lose to Georgia, maybe they even lose a close game to Georgia. Georgia probably leapfrogs at least Miami and Penn State, and then pending what happens with Notre Dame, right? Let's just say Notre Dame takes care of business against USC. Notre Dame might move up to 3. Georgia probably falls in at least at 4. But then does Texas really fall that far? And do they fall behind us, right? Especially with a close loss. But even if it's not a super close loss in the SEC championship game, is the committee really going to drop Texas? Obviously, they have to put Georgia in front of Texas at that point, right? But the question becomes, how far does Texas drop? Would they drop below us at 8? Again, assuming all else stays equal. Let's say Miami wins, and beats SMU. Let's say Notre Dame wins, Penn State. All these teams just ride out the rest of the season, and it's close loss to Texas. I think Texas comes in a rank one spot ahead of us. I think is what the committee would actually do.
It's definitely possible. I think it depends on the A&M game as well. I mean, let's be honest. This A&M game is like their biggest game of the season by far, outside of the Georgia game where they got blown out. So they have a real opportunity to boost their resume with this A&M win. It's on the road, so if they blow out A&M and then they, like you said, like lose close to Georgia, then you're looking at a Texas team and the committee who, let's be honest, doesn't really like Tennessee all that much. They're going to say, okay, Texas only lost to one team this season, and it's Georgia. They played them harder on a neutral field. That means Texas has got better. So they're going to be looking at that. And plus, they already love Texas. I mean, we've been saying, does Texas deserve to be number 3 right now, considering what who they've played, how they've looked? Dakota already mentioned we played Georgia much, much tougher. I mean, it's like a 15 and a 14-point loss, but those losses aren't even comparable. I mean, the 14-point loss was a 7-point game with 4 minutes left in the game with Tennessee having the ball. So it is going to be interesting how they handle that. I mean, I think just overall, like Dakota's mentioned several times, what are they going to do with the conference championship losers, because we have never seen it. Keep in mind, we haven't mentioned this yet on the show, 2022 TCU was questioned all year, lost their conference championship, and was still number 3 seeded. So keep that in mind, people. And that was in the 14 playoff era.
That's a great point. That is a great point to remind folks about what happened with TCU. So I think Austin, then I think what you're saying is ultimately making me even more confident that I don't see a scenario where we leapfrog Texas if they lose to Georgia in the SEC championship game. I just unfortunately I don't see that scenario. So we would need some real shakeup. Even with a Miami loss to SMU, does SMU leapfrog us? Even if Miami falls below us, does SMU leapfrog us? Or how, Dakota? Do you feel like how locked in we're at? We're going to be right now. We're the 9th seed, right? Based on this ranking that dropped tonight. How much mobility do you feel like we truly have from that 9 seed?
I think we should feel relatively confident, because basically see it as like a 2-spot buffer behind us. 12 seed we can't get that. That's locked to one of those conference champs or the group of 5. So really we have 2 spots behind us that if chaos was to ensue, we could fall back into. And with the automatic bids and the buys, it does complicate things. Where if SMU were to win and they jump into the 3 seed, I guess 4. I guess it'd be 3. 3 is kind of the lowest they can be. It would all come down to where Miami lands, and they would be ahead of us. I think they would be ahead of us. I think Austin's point with TCU is massive. That was a weird year too, because I think Alabama was 5th at 2 losses that year. So the teams around them made it more complicated. But I think with how even everybody kind of is right now, I think they would be tempted to just kind of let it just slide a little. Like, you move 1 spot down. We're not going to punish you. And Georgia's probably the worst case scenario that the committee wants, is to have to be faced with the question of Georgia now has 1 more loss than Tennessee. They're this close to each other in the rankings. Can we put them below Tennessee with the head-to-head, or can't we? And it could be the difference in those 2 teams playing in Athens or in Knoxville. So they would control that destiny, and that would be I think that's a doomsday scenario for them. I think it's the last thing they want to have happen. But and to y'all's point on Texas, they're very interesting when looking at their schedule. Like, they've played a lot of common opponents as us, but those games are all very similar. Like Kentucky at home won by 17. At Arkansas is the big difference. They won by 10, but that game was close throughout. They did handle Florida pretty well, won by 32. But that Vanderbilt game at Vanderbilt, they won by 3. So that's where we have the key to set our schedules separately. And then the way they handled Georgia the first time at home versus us playing on the road is a key difference. And to your point, like Austin, about them, this A&M game being massive, this is technically, in terms of currently ranked opponents, this is only their 2nd ranked matchup. A lot of the teams they played were ranked at one point, but ended up not being anywhere near as good. Michigan was 10th when they played, but that's not even remotely true now. And then Vanderbilt was ranked when they played, so you count that as a ranked win based on the time it was played. But other than that, Oklahoma was 18th when they played. They were still coming off of the loss that we gave them. So this is really their first test since that game. And to be honest, if you look at their track record on the road, besides the Michigan game, this is only their 4th road game. And they
got such a favorable
at Vanderbilt,
schedule.
Won by a field goal. And at Arkansas at noon, they won by 10. So Texas has honestly not looked great. So
yeah, Chris shouted out in the chat they have no key wins. It's true. They literally have none. Their first opportunity is this A&M game, and that A&M win is going to look worse now because A&M just lost to Auburn. Now, had A&M not lost to Auburn, it'd look better, but A&M's coming off a loss, so people expect Texas to win that game. I've been questioning why Texas is 3 all year, but it's like one of those things that, who else are you going to put there at this point? Personally, Tennessee fans might not want to hear this. I would have Georgia there. If I ranked it, I would have Oregon, Ohio State, and Georgia. I think Georgia's the 3rd best team in the country, and they're going to end up. Listen, you never know. It's football. Georgia's going to win that SEC championship game. The only team they don't beat in the SEC championship game is Alabama and Nick Saban, and Nick Saban's gone. So Kirby's going to want to win that SEC championship game. Plus, it's very crucial. I mean, that team who wins that game gets a bye week, and that is extremely crucial. So they're going to be up for that game, and we have no reason to believe. Listen, you can argue that Texas is better than they were when they played Georgia a couple weeks ago, but I mean, it's a neutral field, and as Dakota and I discussed, it's Atlanta, which isn't really very neutral for Georgia. So I just don't see how Georgia doesn't win that game, which is, again, what we want as Tennessee fans at this point, because it opens it up with the potential of Texas dropping us and us getting a home playoff game, and B, we don't have to play Georgia, which is, listen, home or away, I don't really want to play Georgia, frankly. I would much rather get that Indiana scenario Dakota was discussing earlier, whether it's on the road or at home, either one. I would love to play Indiana. I'd love to play Notre Dame. I'd love to play Miami, even though that's probably not going to happen.
In any team but Georgia, basically, at
literally.
this point is for the first round. And let's talk about that, right? So let's talk about at these rankings that dropped tonight. As it stands right now, Tennessee has literally the toughest path in the playoff, right? As a 9 seed, we're playing Georgia at the 8th seed. You know, that would be an away game, and then we would draw Oregon, the number 1 overall seed, next. Right, coming off a bye. We have literally the toughest path. So to put on my BVS cap again real quick, as it stands right now, and again, this is all assuming we beat Vanderbilt. Please, God, just beat Vanderbilt, okay? I can't say that enough. But as it stands right now, we've got the toughest path in the playoff. And then you look at, and Austin, you know, you made this point, which was a great point early on this season on the podcast. You talked about that 5 seed, you know, being such a crazy good seed, and your predictions absolutely coming true. Again, at the standings tonight, okay, 5 seed Ohio State would be a 5 seed, again, because of the automatic bids. Oregon has the 1 seed, Texas at the 2 seed, again, assuming that Texas were to win the SEC championship. We don't think that'll happen, but if it were to happen tonight, if we were to play the playoffs today, Texas at the 2 seed, Miami at 3, Boise State at 4, because they're the highest ranked conference, the group of 5, right? And so Boise State, Ohio State at the 5 seed would have a home game against Arizona State. Arizona State, assuming Arizona State wins the Big 12 championship, and then Ohio State would go on to play Boise State.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that, you know, insane draw for Ohio State. Now, I don't think it's going to actually end up shaking out that way, but honestly, Ohio State may not have much, you know, even
movement.
more something. Exactly. They may not have much movement, you know? And so now I kind of feel that way about us too. I don't know how much mobility we have, you know, from here. We're kind of, you know, at the mercy of some losses and what the playoff committee does with, again, like you all have talked about with Texas and things like that. But Ohio State probably doesn't have much mobility. And so they're looking at this crazy good draw at the 5 seed. And so, in my opinion, we got to pray for something to happen for us to, you know, even if, again, let's talk about that scenario where Texas doesn't fall below us, right? Texas maybe is right in front of us. Then that simply just swaps Texas and Georgia. Then we're playing Texas on the road, and we're still getting Oregon in the second round. That's not. Again, my BVS hat is not on right now, but that's not a great path for us.
Yeah, man. I think it just speaks to how unwell thought out this whole process was. This whole automatic bids and everything. First year of the playoff, it's looking like we're getting a group of 5 champion taking the top 4 seeds, which shouldn't happen. I mean, this should not happen. I think it speaks to the weakness of the Big 12. And the Big 12, frankly, shouldn't be considered a Power 4 conference. If a conference is so poor in the committee's eyes, which is really true at this point, they are right on the Big 12, it is a very poor conference, then the conference champion shouldn't make it. I mean, what if we have a 3-loss conference champion in the Big 12, which is possible at this point? That could shake out some way. Really? That team deserves to potentially, if Boise State slips up, to have a bye week? Or does Boise State deserve to have a bye week? who just struggled against Wyoming. I mean, we weren't thinking when we made these rankings. And to Blake's point, it makes it so unfair for a team, or uneven competitively for a team like Ohio State or Oregon who gets that 5 seed, who's going to walk to the Final Four.
And I think to what you were talking about with Ohio State's mobility, if their second loss is just another loss to the number 1 team in the country, I mean, it's kind of hard. Even if Notre Dame, blows out USC, it's kind of hard to envision a scenario where they put them behind them, just because their only loss. They would have 2, but really it's the same team twice. That's the best team in the country.
Mm-hmm.
But we've talked about it a lot with the 5 seed, and Ohio State seems to be in a good position. But the more I think about Notre Dame, like, obviously you want a bye week, but Notre Dame is poised every single year to be the 5 seed. It's theirs to lose because the highest they get up, they get it. They don't have to play a conference championship game. They get to sit out that week. They're kind of getting a bye week anyway, compared to the teams around them that are all going to be in conference championships, and then they get to play the weakest team in the first round. But yeah, and I want to shout out Brody here in the chat, because this is also a very good point about weather, because it is bringing in something that has never really been a factor in college football for a while.
Sure.
Is that at the end of the year, playing teams that are in a completely different climate than you is completely new, and that's fantastic. Because like we just watched, the Browns and Steelers play in a snowstorm on Thursday last week, and now we could see Texas traveling up north and having to play, a winter game, and now the same for us. It'd be interesting to see. We probably don't want to play anywhere cold, because that is unique, and then vice versa, where teams are now going to have to come down south at this time. I don't know if Miami is hosting a game. I don't think anybody wants to go to Miami. I don't think Ohio State wants to try. I don't think Indiana wants to go to Miami at this time.
Great point.
So that's an interesting completely new aspect to college football that didn't really exist before this playoff, which is going to be pretty cool to see play out.
Yeah, looking at from the Vols perspective, dude. I mean, do you trust Heupel's offense to travel into the cold? I mean, it's going to be tough. Like, are we going to be able to go as fast and things like that, especially if it's a weather game? I mean, when's the last time Tennessee played in the snow, boys?
Nico played in California growing up too, so
exactly.
Throw in the cold.
Polynesian man, I don't know how he's gonna do in that kind of weather. Y'all make great points, and shout out to Brody in the chat. Like Dakota said, I'm gonna catch up on chat here in a second, in a little bit. Just we got a few comments rolling in here, so I'm gonna kind of catch up on that. But yeah, man, there's pros and cons of this playoff system, right? We're talking about the cons in this crazy seeding, but the pros are, man, when's the last time we had such a chaotic year, right? In college football, and then also Dakota, you're talking about going to different climates and things like that. We're gonna see things that we've never seen before, which is great. That's fun, right? It's awesome. But man, fix the freaking seeding, please.
Exactly.
Ohio State has the easiest road to the Final Four I've ever seen in my life.
Well, to be more optimistic to your point, Blake, about the playoff and the good news about it, I remember as a kid, I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, starting to fall in love with football. There was no college football playoff at the time. Never happened. And I asked Dad, do you think it'll ever happen? He said no. And I said, could the President of the United States make a college football playoff happen? He said, yeah, probably. And I said, will it happen? He said, nope, never happen. will never happen in his lifetime. And here we are. We're up to 12 teams. So it's fun. It's awesome because the way Heupel has us playing since 2022, we're always going to be in the conversation for it. But I agree, Blake. You have to fix the seeding. Luckily, the contract ends in 2025, so we only have 2 years of this format. And hopefully they can get it fixed and have the best 12 teams in there at the very minimum.
Yeah, it's tough. So sorry, because I'm personally torn on it when it comes to the automatic bid stuff. I don't think it should play into getting bye weeks whatsoever, but I don't necessarily hate the conference champs squeaking in at the end. But maybe they make it where if you're not in the top 12, you don't make it. Right, you just seed wherever you're at. The best 12 teams go if you win your conference championship. Obviously, the conference championship games are the best opportunity to have a quality win. So if you can't move into the top 12 from beating your conference opponent, then you probably didn't deserve to be there in the first place. So I think that's probably the best way to handle it. because then you get the 12 best teams. Because let's be honest, like Arizona, whoever wins the Big 12, they
They're going to get bounced.
They're going to get bounced. I mean, yeah, especially if it's Ohio State. I mean, they may not even start Will Howard that game. They can start the backup, let him rest, get ready.
Just rest him up.
Get ready for Boise State.
I was about to say, the only team the Big 12 champ might even be able to beat is Boise State, and as it stands right now, Boise State's sitting pretty with a bye. So who knows what's going to happen? Hey, we're going to give a few shout outs in the chat here. We had some chat activity going on. We appreciate y'all tuning in. We're going to keep talking about stuff, and again, this is the first live episode of Vol Talk, so we appreciate y'all going on this journey with us, right? As Austin and I have said all season long, this is a low quality production, okay, but we are moving up the
trending up,
baby, ladder. Okay, we've got a brand new logo. Shout out to my boy Zeke. My boy Zeke hooked us up with a brand new logo, so shout out to him. If you ever need some website design, he is your guy. I'll get you hooked up. Holler at me, I'll get you hooked up. But yeah, we got a new logo. We're gonna try to up our production quality, and we got some surprises in store for y'all. If we do beat Vanderbilt and make it into the playoffs, and we do a playoff preview game, we're gonna have the final rankings, all that good stuff. We're gonna hit y'all with a surprise live episode with that as well. So again, we appreciate y'all joining us. Shout out to Joseph. Says go Big Orange. Aaron Watson talking about the men's tennis team from Kentucky doing pretty good. I don't know.
Whoa, wrong stream, buddy.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate you watching, Aaron.
Yeah, appreciate it, Aaron. Holt says Holt looked up for us about the stat for SC running backs. Quick research, I think the only SC running backs with 20-plus rushing TDs and not on the dope finalist list are Alex Collins from Arkansas in 2015 and Trey Mason, interesting
two names.
Trey Mason from Auburn in 2013. So pretty rare company that I don't think Dylan Sampson deserves to be in there. Shout out to Chris Chambers. Talking about, hey, we need Nico to have his best game. You're absolutely right.
No doubt about it.
And Chris agrees with me that the playoff committee is going to find a way to sneak Alabama in.
You might not be wrong.
Which again I hate, but appreciate you, W. Queener, throwing out that big orange. Chris made a good point again. Texas doesn't have any big wins. Brooks says split up the SEC teams. I kind of agree. I would love to, see Big Ten teams play SEC teams instead of us cannibalize each other in the first round of the playoff. But we'll see. Dakota gave out that shout out to Brody about the weather. Chris says it's ridiculous. This committee is not taking into consideration strength of schedule. Yeah, it's weird, right? They take it into consideration in some ways and then not in others. It's very strange.
Depending on who they like, really. Let's be honest.
Exactly. It depends on what letter is on that helmet. Marvin says Tennessee by 24. Go Big Orange. Savage Orange. I like that prediction. I like that prediction.
GBO, baby.
We appreciate Austin Sellers. Fine looking gents right there. He says,
my man.
I don't know about that, but I appreciate that hype up. And Albert says, "Go Big Orange." We appreciate you, Albert. Again, thank you all for tuning in. If you're just now joining us, the playoff rankings have dropped. Tennessee is in at the 9 seed. We are ranked 8th, but again, we are dropping to the 9 seed as a result of automatic bids. Boise State getting that 4 seed right now if the playoffs were to be played today, which is crazy. So. Y'all, I mean, what else? Let's talk about below Tennessee, right? We've been talking about what happens with Georgia and Texas, right? We've been talking about Ohio State's insanely easy path right now to the national championship, or at least to the Final Four. But let's talk about some shakeup. What about Penn State? What about we maybe need to talk more about SMU and Miami. And then, what else? We've got Indiana, right? So Indiana, I don't even know who they have in the this final regular season game, right? So what happens if obviously if they lose, they're out, right? So is there any other chaos? Put it this way: is there any other chaos that you all could see, like aside from Texas and Georgia? Austin, you talked a little bit about South Carolina squeaking in if they beat Clemson. I mean, talk to us about that. What could we see below Tennessee?
I will say we have a little bit more viewers right now, so we should probably talk about the A&M scenario. If A&M beats Texas, they are going to the SEC championship game, and God forbid if they beat Georgia, that's probably our doomsday scenario, because you still have the question: will the committee keep Texas above us? Remember, A&M's guaranteed to be above us. They got the automatic bid, so they'll probably be the third seed or the second seed, however it shakes out. And then Georgia, in my opinion, I think if Georgia loses the conference championship, depending on the loss, I think a little bit, I think they're still going to be ranked above us. So then, in that scenario, all of a sudden we're actually getting jumped. If everyone else wins, everything else plays out the way it is right now. That way we're getting jumped. A&M jumps us, and then Texas stays above us, which I don't. If I'm being honest, I don't think Texas would stay above us, because the committee would eventually have to be like, listen, every ranked team they've played, they've got beat. They haven't beat a single ranked team. But, I mean, still, I wouldn't like that. I wouldn't like an extra SEC team like A&M coming from the top rope all the way at 20, all of a sudden getting a bye week.
Yeah. I think those are the primary things in terms of teams coming from behind. The Big 12 is lurking. There's no way they jump us, so we don't have to worry about that. But in terms of other chaos that can ensue behind us, it's still that Clemson-South Carolina game becomes more intriguing every time, because with the teams ahead of them, if when SMU loses and stuff, like, it makes it easier to move a team up and make them jump somebody, I think, when you have losses in front of them. And honestly, the group of five, we keep locking in Boise State, but they're going to have to play UNLV in the conference championship game.
Tough game.
And that's a tough game. And now UNLV is lurking at 22. Tulane is at 17. So it's really between those three. Army tragically dropped all the way out of the rankings because they had to play a good team, and they got obliterated. So really it's between those three, but it'd be curious to see what happens if UNL beats Boise State and Tulane wins their conference, the American. Then does Tulane take that spot? And the only shakeup that could have is which team jumps us, right? Because right now Boise State is the 4 seed. But if Tulane moves up, then assuming Arizona State wins out, then it changes things slightly, where we have Tulane sliding at 12. Arizona State's the 4 seed now, which changes things a little bit. I think Ohio State, one of the most fascinating things about the automatic bid stuff is if you are the 5 seed, it's a weird scenario where you want that draw where you're playing the Power 4 conference champ first, in my opinion, because you get them at home. You'd rather play them at home than a neutral field, and getting the group of 5 on a neutral field is nothing, right? But if that was flipped, where then they get a group of 5, if they have to play Boise State at home, that's a non-factor regardless, and then you have to get Arizona State neutral, a little bit tougher matchup. So from the group, from the 5 seeds perspective, you kind of want the Power 4 champ at 12, just from the sake of where you get to play those teams. But yeah, really the major chaos in terms of teams that could come flying up besides A&M is really SMU throws a wrench in that a little bit. But again, it comes down to, does Miami drop below us? Them being 2 spots ahead of us. What's interesting is clearly the biggest discrepancy in this is the AP voters have zero respect for Miami. They actually watched the game. They watched the Wake Forest game.
Respect to the AP polls.
Respect those guys, because they watched it. They're below us and Georgia, which is very interesting. So I'd be fascinated to see if Georgia does lose to if Miami loses to SMU, there may be more of a chance they drop below us. Because I think you could make the argument that as long as that team is still making the playoff,
it's fine.
It's fine, right?
Yep.
Exactly. Like if you drop them out for losing it, where SMU losing it makes it more complicated for them. I think they're more likely to just, okay, you just lost, so we're going to bump you. You got a road game now instead of a home game, so you're still here. But I think that'd be fascinating to see. I think they could just flip the 2 seeds, to be honest. Because that's also the convenient part in a lot of this is these teams are playing each other, where they could literally just swap their ranking and be just like, that works.
That works.
That's why Texas could be ahead of us, because they're like, we can't be bothered to think about it, so 7 is now open. We're going to put Texas there.
Exactly. I think, and the only other team that could jump us, I think, outside of A&M is probably Clemson, like y'all discussed. The Clemson South Carolina scenario. If they blow out South Carolina, because South Carolina's been playing really well, we'll see on that. I don't know how the committee will handle this, but for the Alabama haters in the chat, which I am one of them. Okay, I hate Alabama. That's one of the things. We're worried about Tennessee, number one. Number two, I'm worried about Alabama getting the hell out of the playoffs. I think the winner of Clemson, South Carolina is guaranteed to get in over Alabama. Just looking at these rankings, man, I think the win would be big enough. And depending on how Alabama plays the Auburn Bowl or the Iron Bowl, but I think if Carolina gets that win, they're in striking distance. It's going to be a huge win for them. And again, I think it always matters on the margin of victory and things like that. But listen, the committee they cannot stand on this head-to-head crap. We as Vols fans know this, okay? There was no injury this year to our quarterback, and they still ranked Alabama ahead of us, okay? So none of the head-to-head crap. We don't want to hear it, okay? South Carolina has been better. I think if I ranked it, okay, and I would be objective, okay? Maybe a little bit not objective, but I would mostly be objective. I would rank South Carolina ahead of Alabama right now, okay? They have the same record. One team is playing better. And if you watch that game, if that's on a neutral field, Carolina wins with ease. With ease, dude. They threw the game away in the end. It's a 2-point loss at Alabama. Listen, dude, Carolina's playing better. I think they're a better team. So I think it's going to be really tough for Alabama to make these playoffs at this point.
I think. Sorry, go ahead, Blake.
Go ahead.
Yeah, about one thing that I think throws a wrench in this a little bit is if Austin's rankings were correct, where Ole Miss was ahead of Alabama, I think that weirdly helped South Carolina if that was the case, because they put Ole Miss directly above them, who they lost to 27-3. So that could complicate things a little bit. I completely agree, though, that if I was ranking this, I would have South Carolina at 13, personally. I think the way they've looked the last 4 weeks has been substantially better than Ole Miss and Alabama. But I think Ole Miss coming in directly above them is an interesting scenario of, okay, this team beat them by 24 earlier this year. Can we move them ahead of them? And then in junction with that, move them ahead of another team they lost? But to your point, though, like, the committee has looked us in the face numerous times and told us head-to-head doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
So let's do it to the team that you've done that for, okay?
Yep.
Let's say, because honestly, we watched the South Carolina game. They tried to lose that at the end when they played Alabama. They should have won. They had that game in their grasp and just let it slip. And that was it may have been a home game for them. I can't remember if it was at Bryant-Denny or not.
Which game are you talking about?
Had to be,
Alabama.
yeah. It had to be a Bryant.
The South Carolina game?
The South Carolina game
Yes.
was, yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, that right there alone to me, I again, if us beating Alabama by a field goal in 22 meant nothing with an injured quarterback, regardless of that, and then this year beating them by 7 meant nothing, then a 2-point win where you got lucky in the end, to me, should mean absolutely nothing as well. Especially when their quality wins are now better. The Georgia win, where they should have lost it and almost blew that, can only carry them so far.
Exactly, man. Exactly.
Well, especially with what we were talking about earlier, which is again the recency bias, right? It's it seems like for some teams this team is playing much better now, and then other teams it's just a blind eye to how they're playing now compared to earlier in the season or whatever the case may be. So I hope y'all are right. Austin put it very succinctly and correctly that on this podcast we are Tennessee first and foremost. Tennessee love first, and then Alabama hate second, with Florida hate coming in right behind that. So I don't care how it happens. I just want Alabama to not make the playoff. To Austin's point, like you said, Austin, I'd love to play him again. Why not?
Love to play him. Love to play him.
Love to play
Barbecue
him
chicken.
It'd be in Neyland again too. So.
Yeah, I'd love to have him in Neyland again. But I mean, can y'all imagine Knoxville if we beat Alabama in the playoffs? It would just
Be bumping,
Apo-
baby.
apocalyptic. But I'd love to play them again, but I don't want to see Alabama in the playoffs. They don't deserve to be in the playoffs. You're absolutely right, Austin. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of Shane Beamer, but I think you'll make a great point, about South Carolina jumping into the picture and jumping above Alabama with a win against Clemson. So there's all kind. At the end of the day, we didn't. Austin, you and I talked about the different scenarios for, okay, what does Tennessee need this past weekend, right, to be where we want to be? And it was like, oh, we need, several things. We could have several things. We need to either root for Alabama to lose to Oklahoma, or we need Ole Miss to lose to Florida, or we need Notre Dame to lose to Army, and we're listing all these things. And again, the BVS in us is like, none of those are probably going to happen. And objectively, none of them, objectively speaking, based on who was favored in those games, none of them really should have happened.
If you
But
went
then,
game by game, but as a
if
whole,
exactly,
logically, one of them's going to happen.
Logically, maybe one of them was going to happen, right? But if you go game by game, none of them should have happened, right? But then several of them did.
Yep.
And even looking at it as a whole, it was statistically unlikely that many teams dropped favorably for us. So there's still a week left in the regular season. Anything could happen, right? Bottom line is, for us, beat Vanderbilt. That's what we're gonna say, right? We've been beating that dead horse. But what is just to kind of wrap this up? Chris Chambers says Alabama hate first.
Agreed, brother.
I'm not going to disagree with you there. But yeah, for me, Tennessee love first, and then Alabama hate next. But again, Chris, I'm not going to argue with you. So let's kind of wrap this up. Let's talk about going into this final week. Okay, let's assume that Tennessee takes care of business against Vanderbilt. Let's say it's not necessarily close, but let's not necessarily it's a blowout either. Let's just say we just go in, we beat them by a touchdown or two, and take care of business. Okay. Outside of that, what for each of you do you want to see the most? What do you want to see in terms of this final week of the regular season and then conference championship games? What is your wish list? Dakota, let's start with you.
That is, I think, number one would probably be Texas and Georgia handling business. In terms of the chaos from the SEC, I want them to take care of business. That in rivalry week is number one, because I just don't think things could get complicated if Georgia loses to Georgia Tech and then has to jump back ahead of us and things. That could get messy quick. And then other than that, give me complete chaos again. I mean, there is crazy scenarios that could still get us into the 5 seed. Like the percent chance of that is absolutely minimal, but it's not zero. I mean, Notre Dame getting blown out by USC. With the ACC, if SMU blows out Miami in the ACC championship game, Ohio State losing to Michigan, which is very possible.
Very.
I think all of those things are plausible, and I think it would be a solid path to the 5 seed, because that's like our peak at this point, right? That's the best we could possibly do, and as you touched on earlier a lot, like it's kind of the best option. We would, nothing's a gimme, but I think we would almost collectively agree we feel better about those 2 games than we do about Vanderbilt, which is kind of crazy to say. But yeah, I think it's hard to pinpoint things specifically because the weight that they each carry and where we can end up. I think the main thing I just want to focus on is, assuming we beat Vanderbilt, is just squeaking into a home playoff game. Yeah. I think getting round 1 in Neyland is the key to going on a run. I think if we have to play on the road again to start things, my faith is going to be lower. If we're in Bloomington against Indiana somehow, okay, maybe. But pretty much anywhere, if you look at the teams ahead of us, like, we're not going to want to go back to Athens. That's worst case scenario. We're not going to want to go to Austin. We're not going to want to go to South Bend. We're not going to want to go to any of those places. And starting the playoffs off with a home game, which really means we just need one thing to go our way. Like you talked about, and I look like, a massive pessimist now after last week's show where I was predicting we wouldn't be in, and then immediately here we are talking about a home playoff game.
Yep.
So if we could just have one instead of multiple of those chaotic things happen this week, then we can be sitting pretty for a home playoff game, and I think that's the key to being able to actually go on a run. And to your point, that will be the best atmosphere in college football history, is kneeling for a playoff game. It'll be insane. So
Absolutely. Austin, wish list. What is your wish list? I think Dakota hit the nail pretty close to the head, but what do you have to add to that?
I agree with everything Dakota said. If absolute chaos happens and we got the 5 seed, that would be phenomenal. Really, I'm looking at one thing happening, and this is all going to reset next week. We're probably going to do this same show next week, hopefully, when all these week 14 games play out, and we're going to be looking forward to the conference championships, seeing what happens there. But number one thing is, I really just want to see one team drop below us right now, because it's going to be very hard in that scenario where we don't get that home playoff game. And to Dakota's point, dude, Heupel since 2022, the beginning of the 2022 season. So keep in mind, 2021 is his first season. 2022 is his second season on campus. Since that season, he is 20-1 at home. 20-1, with the only loss being to undefeated number 1 Georgia. Now, Georgia didn't go on to win the national championship that year, but I think a lot of people agree if they made the playoffs, they probably would have won it all that year. So that's our only home loss under Heupel's tenure since his first year on campus, and we don't even have to get into all that, how depleted the roster was and everything. He is elite at home. He is elite at home. We're a different ball team at home, and right now, as Dakota said, so much happened last week. We are in striking distance. All we need is Notre Dame to drop one to USC, and boom, we're right there. All we need is SMU to blow out Miami in the conference championship game, and I believe, boom, we're right there. Georgia to blow out Texas, boom, potentially right there. So there's so much that can still happen at this point to just bump us one spot. That's all we need, one spot.
Just one. We just need one more spot for a playoff game in Neyland, and man, what an absolute blast that would be. Honestly, we talked about the podcast ending abruptly if we lose to Vanderbilt. The podcast might also end abruptly if we have a home playoff game and then win that playoff game, because the three of us, or collectively or individually, might do illegal things and end up in jail, right? Or end up dead.
Very possible.
It's possible. So, so
not out of the question.
Do us a favor, if you're watching, do a wellness check for us. If you don't see us drop an episode after a playoff game in Neyland. But listen, we're talking about these scenarios for the playoffs and getting a home playoff game. We're going to say it one more time. The bottom line, win and you're in. Okay? So the preview show for the Vanderbilt game is going to drop tomorrow. For those of you who have been watching or are still watching and haven't subscribed yet, please just go ahead and subscribe for us. Hit that notification bell. You'll get notified when we drop that episode for the Vandy preview. That's going to drop tomorrow morning. You'll see Austin and my thoughts on the Vanderbilt game and the do or die, the win and you're in. And so we hope that you all have enjoyed this live reaction show. We first time in Vol Talk podcast history, which has only not even been a full season yet, so there's not a lot of history, but hey, there's you gotta have a first of everything, right? So this was our first live reaction show. We really appreciate Dakota joining us. Dakota has provided really awesome, valuable insight and analysis. Austin, he almost hit the nail on the head with those rankings, man. You got one thing swapped. So that was pretty impressive insight there from Austin. Any final thoughts, y'all, before we close it out? Any final thoughts from either of you on these rankings or Tennessee going into this Vanderbilt week?
Just beat Vandy, baby.
Yeah, my only thing, since you guys are handling the Vandy preview, I just want to say it is wild now being at this point. The entire time Austin and I have been watching college football together, we used to go into the Vandy game hoping to make a bowl game. And now here we are on the brink of playoff berth. So it's how far we've come. How far we have come.
Yeah.
And listen, y'all aren't too much younger than me, but I do have to, say just real quick for
educate us, brother.
It wasn't always that way, okay? We won, what was it, 35 or 40 straight against Vanderbilt or something like that. That's 40 years. That's an entire lifetime, okay? That's an entire half of a lifetime. Um, it didn't always used to be that way. What's happening right now? Okay, this is what Tennessee football is. This is what Tennessee. This should be the floor for Tennessee football. Okay, is always in that
Correct.
conversation. Okay, Tennessee football is right there, and like Austin and I talked about a little bit on the episodes this week, it's different wearing the big orange. Okay, Tennessee football is different. It's not like other schools. The tradition, the passion here. Okay, this is different football. Okay, this is different fandom, and so for you younger viewers, just know that what we're experiencing right now, this is the way it should be, and expect nothing less. Okay, you do not expect anything less from Tennessee moving forward than this right here. So we're excited. We're happy to be in this conversation. To Dakota's point, and so we really appreciate y'all joining us for this live reaction show. This will post our YouTube channel, so if you're catching it after the fact, we appreciate you watching after the fact. Again, go ahead and drop us a comment, drop a like on the video, subscribe, and again, we're going to continue to increase our production quality as well. So we appreciate y'all joining us for this ride on this podcast. We really appreciate, even if it's just 35 people, we appreciate you all and y'all supporting us. But at the end of the day, we all love the Vols, and so can't wait to watch the game with y'all this weekend. We're going to sweat a little bit, but man, it's going to be a good time if we win. So thank y'all again for joining us. We hope y'all have a great night, and we will see y'all tomorrow for the Vanderbilt